The Qur'an is an extraordinary miracle of the Prophet Muhammad. The Qur'an is not only a blessing for Muslims, but also medicine, guidance, and sources of scientific information can be found in the Qur'an. For example, a scientist from France, Professor Dr. Maurice Bucaille, converted to Islam after examining the body of the Pharaoh. According to him, there is nothing in any book that explains the fate of Pharaoh's body other than the Qur'an. The story begins in 1898. Egyptian archaeologists managed to find the mummy of Pharaoh. Egypt also held an exhibition of the Pharaoh's mummy in 1907 at the Cairo Museum. Then in 1975, the French government offered to research and study the Pharaoh's mummified body, which was said to be still intact. Until finally Pharaoh's body was flown to France and put in a special room to be studied and researched by leading scientists and surgeons in France. Professor Dr. Maurice Bucaille was the leading chief surgeon of that time. He then became the leader and main person in charge of research on Pharaoh's mummy. He used all his abilities to study and analyze Pharaoh's mummified body, including finding the cause of his death and uncovering the complete mystery of Pharaoh's body. Apparently, the final results he obtained were very surprising. The remains of salt attached to Pharaoh's mummified body were the biggest evidence that he had died by drowning. His body was removed from the sea, then embalmed to be immediately mummified so that it would last longer. This discovery still left a question in the professor's head. How could this body be better than the other bodies, even though it was taken out of the sea? Prof. Bucaille then prepared a final report about something he believed was a new discovery, namely about the rescue of the Pharaoh's corpse from the sea and its preservation. But then, one of his colleagues whispered that Professor Bucaille should not rush in making a final conclusion, because Muslims already knew the story of Pharaoh's drowning and how his body remained intact. Professor Bucaille certainly doesn't believe that. According to him, it was impossible for Muslims to know this even though research on his body had just been carried out using sophisticated equipment. His colleague then explained that the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, had already told the story of the drowning of Pharaoh and the rescue of his body. Professor Bucaille was increasingly confused. How could it be possible? His body was only recovered in 1898, while the Quran had existed for thousands of years before that. He sat all night looking at Pharaoh's corpse and kept thinking about it. His colleague's words were still ringing in his mind, that the Quran talked about the story of Pharaoh whose body was saved from destruction thousands of years ago. Meanwhile, in the scriptures of other religions, it only talks about Pharaoh drowning in the middle of the ocean while chasing Moses, and does not talk about Pharaoh's body. Bucaille was even more confused and kept thinking about it. He said to himself, "Does it make sense that this mummy in front of me is the Pharaoh who will arrest Moses? Does it make sense that Muhammad knew about that, even though it happened before the Quran was revealed?" Professor Bucaille could not sleep. He asked to bring the Torah book, Old Testament. He read the Torah, which said, "The water returned as it was before, covering the chariots, the cavalry, and all the Pharaoh's army that went into the sea behind them. Not one of them was left behind." Then he compared it with the Bible. Apparently, the Bible also does not talk about Pharaoh's body being saved and still intact. Because of that, he was even more confused. After the repair of the Pharaoh's corpse and his mummification, the French returned the mummy to Egypt. However, there was no decision that made him happy, no thought that calmed him since he received the discovery and news from his colleague, namely the news that the Muslims had told each other about the rescue of the corpse. He also decided to meet a number of Muslim autopsy scientists. From here, there was a discussion for the first time with Muslim researchers and scientists. He asked about the life of Moses, what Pharaoh did, and his pursuit of Moses until he drowned, and how Pharaoh's body was saved from the sea. So, one of the Muslim scholars stood up while opening a copy of the Quran and reading for Bucaille the Word of God, which means, "So today, we save your bodies so that you can be a lesson for those who come after you, and indeed most of mankind beware of the signs of our power." Qs Yunus 92. This verse touched Bucaille's heart very much. He said that the Quranic verse made sense and encouraged science to advance. His heart trembled, and the vibration made him stand in front of the people present, while exclaiming loudly, "Truly I converted to Islam, and I believe in this Quran."